Starting to see a few more names appear on the screen. All right, what do you think, Mark? Should we go ahead and get it going?
Go ahead and get going.
All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I do hope you're staying warm wherever you are. Today's session is going to focus on the species of greatest conservation need. So each state, territory, DC is required to include SGCNs in their SWAP. Each has their own process for identifying species of greatest conservation need. So in this session, we're going to hear from the SWAP coordinators about the criteria you're using, how they make decisions about what to include, and opportunities to improve regional collaboration and connections related to the species of greatest conservation need. In fact, it's kind of interesting that literally just before this, I was at a meeting with some of the other folks from Science Apps, and they were advertising down in the Southeast region, a meeting that's tomorrow that I'll share the link to here, that is going to look at plants. So feel free to check out the link if you're interested in that. And I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark.
Great. Thanks, Jason. And thanks everyone for joining. I think this is a very timely topic, and really interested in hearing from our speakers today about species of greatest conservation need. This is our 14th learning series, and Jason and I will keep doing these as long as there's interest and a need. So just always welcome your topics, suggestions for topics. We've got probably somewhere on the order of a dozen or more topics yet that all of you have identified as priorities, but there's something that's of a higher urgency, we're always willing to split it, to fit it in. Next month, we're planning to devote most of the session to SWAP data, statewide action plan dashboards and databases, and paperless SWAP. So lots of progress being made on both of those fronts. So looking forward to hearing from both science applications and from our work group on that work. So without further ado, I think we'll get started. I'm not seeing John Canner yet. John, are you on? Not seeing. Oh, there he is. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Mark, hello. Am I coming through okay?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. I'm not seeing anybody else but you. Oh, there's Brett and Jason.
I'm sorry, John, I usually go off screen for the presentations.
Okay. We're not ready yet, are we?
Oh yeah, no, you're good to go.
We're queued up to go, John. Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wasted no time. All right. Well, not surprisingly, I have some slides I want to share. Let me make sure you're all able to see them. Is that coming up?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Try this again. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah, I made you a co-host.
Okay. Well, I will try it again.
Did you accept it when it went out? Maybe you weren't on yet when I did that.
Is it up yet?
Yes, perfect.
All right, there we go. All right. Well, I know most of you who are on here, but just to reintroduce myself, John Cantor, the senior wildlife biologist with the National Wildlife Federation, working on the second of two agreements with Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. This second one that spans fall of 2023 and all of 24 is to focus on upgrades and enhancing the USGS National SGCN database. And many of you have met my colleague, Karina Newsom, who's also been instrumental to helping on this project. So these are the objectives that are part of the project. The coordination with all of you.
Hey, John, we're just seeing the title slide right now.
Huh. I have no idea why that would be. Let me go back to screen sharing and see.
You're not in presentation mode. You've got slides off on the left column too. So
It should be I hit presentation mode.
I mean, I think it's fine.
How's this? Is it coming up with objectives?
Nope. Now you're in presentation mode.
Okay.
There you go.
Now's it there?
Yep, you got it.
Great. It must be, I'm on the network of our Vermont office, so my apologies. That must be slowing things down. Yeah, so number one objective is the engagement with the states and with the service and USGS. We've talked about in our past listening session with the states, possibly increasing the number of data fields and the process that we need to use for better data ingestion. We have already in the first part of this project had some listening sessions with NGOs, with some of the federal agencies like USGS, NEC, or the CASCs on potential uses of in getting their input on what kind of uses and what kind of role as a conservation planning tool that the database. In the last part of this will be to mock up a design of a landing page that is perhaps more informative in talking about what an SGCN is, maybe providing some summary statistics based on taxonomic groups or other things to make it a little more inviting for folks that are accessing the database through the USGS's website. These are some of the potential uses that came out, determining shared species. This came out of our first agreement, the ability to sort by state and or regional association species, and even things, although this is obviously kind of a pipe dream, but the looking at ways perhaps in the future, that could be used to, some kind of supplemental performance metrics in terms of changes to the SGCN lists. Not surprisingly, the issue that's currently a part of this, making this a better, more usable database is taxonomic reconciliation. I think most of you are aware of how difficult that is, you know, given the changing standards, and also, you know, as we add species, especially when we start getting into plants, where taxonomy standards and stuff are always evolving. The other part that we're talking about in terms of what we're going to be asking states to do is just reducing, you know, kind of text errors in submission, cleaning up, you know, where there's a slash or a colon or something that is this is the SGCN database. You know, what USGS is doing is using a script, you know, bringing in the text data and information from the states, and then using a script. So, you know, being able to get past some of those simple, you know, needed edits that are in there is something that you know, is kind of the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to ways to improve the submission process. At a higher level, we've talked about, you know, ways that we could improve the functionality and kind of reduce the errors, and maybe and make this more of a not just a once every 5-year update, but more of a living database on species of greatest conservation need. You know, so still somewhat in the discussion stages are things like an MOU or other instrument that would kind of lay out you know, expectations and responsibilities. What kind of clearinghouse service that, you know, the WSFR regions might be able to play, you know, since they are the ones who are ultimately there to approve the state wildlife action plans in the SGCN list. Capacity, of course, is always an issue and continues to be with USGS. And then like, you know, one of those other kind of default things is perhaps being able to somehow use an outside contractor or vendor for performing QA/QC. So these are some of the errors and issues that Elizabeth Martin from USGS has shared with us to share with you all, you know, as to what's causing, just to go back to that number, about 1,000 mismatches that are currently in that database. So, you know, it's the taxonomic authorities, it's often, you know, just written as the author, I'm assuming, to species profiles, and not really going back to, you know, itis or worms, or one of the taxonomic authorities. You may get only, you know, genus being mentioned. I think there was or genus being entered. The taxonomic matching, you know, it really requires clean scientific name, and if not, it's tripping the taxonomic matching, and it really creates issues with the standardization. Here's more of those, like just text, you know, kind of simple things that we're going to be looking for states that are going to be submitting on the 2025 timeline. You know, where an abbreviation is being used in the scientific name, that's triggering errors. Using, yeah, you know, kind of shortcut words to, you know, instead of the taxonomic name, and just, yeah, there's all staghorn corals. There's places where all shorebirds are mentioned, and again, this is an automated script that's running, so it's just not going to have a way of dealing with those. And this is, just skip through this quickly, you know, when things like slashes are used between scientific names to kind of separate. You know, it works. It works if you're reading it. It doesn't work if it's going through an automated script. So where we are right now in terms of developing guidance is I'm meeting with Elizabeth Martin from USGS, and we're developing guidance. And I have this up, instructions and best practices versus some kind of form. Really, I think where we're landing is that it's going to be similar to the last submission process, in that they're looking for a list of the species that they can then ingest. The idea of getting to some kind of automated form, it seems like it might be a little out of USGS's reach, but you know, we got a year to work on this, so you know, don't we may come up with something better before the end of this. One thing that has been mentioned is, you know, one of the fields that could fairly easily be added to it is state listing status. Federal status is already in there. And some folks had expressed interest in knowing it would be just a yes or no. Does your state tier your system of ranks, so that if a user of the database was, you know, looking through and they were trying to get to their state or multiple states, so that they would know there's a lot more to the story of the SGCN list. If it was checked off that it was a tiered system, and they would go right to your wildlife action plan and look at that. And this is the column structure being proposed at this time. And like I said before, you know, Elizabeth said that most people are just listing an author for taxonomic authority here, and rather than one of the standardized systems. Something for you all to think about for states that are member states of NatureServe, you know, is where there's the potential, you know, to be able to do some of that taxonomic reconciliation, you know, through your working with NatureServe. So those are just examples. These are other additional fields that are being considered to be added, and you know, this is a mock-up of how it could look in the end. You know, adding state listing and things like whether or not as an RSGCN, and folks also asked for the potential to be able to tag something as federal at risk. So going forward from here, you know, going to continue to have regular meetings and try to do our best to work through the regional chairs of the diversity managers group, and in the case of the West, representatives. And we continue to meet with Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS. I know Paul Van Ryzen and Elizabeth have been talking and bringing Rafa into the conversation and looking at how the dashboard that he is working on can benefit from the SGCN list, and how you know, the SGCN list could benefit maybe from habitat in other fields that he is populating. And then the last thing here is you know, keeping the conversation going with the regional collaborations, whether it's MLI or CCAS or whatever they're naming the Northeast one and the developing one in the West, as that we can continue to talk about the interaction and how there's efficiency between the national database and the regional databases where they're being worked on. Again, my apologies for the technology snafus, but that's what I have, and I'll take any questions.
Yeah, I think, John, we'll just hold off on questions. I know Emily's has one in the chat, and I want to bring Rita up if you could stop sharing your screen. And if we have some time at the end. We'll try to take some questions, but maybe John, you can address that question in the chat for Emily.
Thanks.
Hey, John, I can jump in here and make it so you don't have to read. Emily Van Wyk from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and thank you for that presentation. This is something that I've been digging into lately, just trying to, within state, get that data dictionary going and get that, like, well, what is the American Ornithological Union's update schedule? When does EDIS do it? When do you see it in these different places? Just trying to get data from different partners to match. And so I think you addressed my first question on your next slide. So amazing. Thank you for doing such an excellent job to start with. But then the second question would be, as each state and even sometimes different programs within a state wildlife agency are using different taxonomic authorities, or they have certain reasons to be using an outdated name, would we be seeing an opportunity for there to be a back-end data dictionary? So if Colorado, for instance, is still hung up on sage sparrows and we're trying to match which species crosswalk between which states, would there be a way to do that with matching a taxonomic authority with what that taxonomic authority calls a species and then saying this is the equivalent in another state?
I think the short answer is the best way to approach those is to identify where those problems are occurring, and by flagging. Hopefully there are fewer of places where there's not that agreement, and that could be worked out through conversations. But as far as doing it, like on the back end like that, that's something that we need to ask Elizabeth about. And that does lead me to say this. I think your being the state's contribution to this, a lot of this right now, given the capacity and everything, the ability to get this, I'm not going to say completely right, but to get this as good as we can is really based on the collective commitment to do it right. Because right now the capacity at USGS boils down to one and part of a person.
Gotcha. All right, well, thank you.
Great, thanks for the question, Emily. And I know Ross has one in the chat too. Maybe John, you can take a shot at that. I want to move on to Rita, who's going to talk about data deficient SGCN. Take it away, Rita.
Hi, everybody. And first, Mark, are you seeing my slides?
Yes.
The title slide, Idaho State Wildlife Action Plan?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because I took it out of presenter mode so I could still see you guys. Hi, everybody. Today, I'd like to talk to you about what we did in our 2023 State Wildlife Action Plan revision in terms of how we addressed species that really were deficient in information, some type of information. So I'm going to describe how we categorized our species of greatest conservation need and greatest information need, and then walk you through what we did. Okay, now it's not letting me advance for some reason. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So first of all, we were all accustomed to talking about species of greatest conservation need in our state wildlife action plan. So in our most recent revision, which we finished, and we're just waiting to hear a final word from the regional review team, we decided that to better address conservation actions for the various species in our state wildlife action plan, we decided to divide them into two categories. So the first is species of greatest conservation need, and we define those as species that are known to be experiencing declines or are at risk due to various stressors or emerging issues, and for which reasonable and testable hypotheses can be devised concerning the role of these stressors, challenges, or threats. So these particular species do not have the knowledge and certainty of what we consider species of greatest information need. and face known challenges for which we identify conservation actions. So next, this is how we looked at species of greatest conservation need. So there are species that are potentially at risk, but for which current scientific knowledge and expert understanding are lacking. And for these species, knowledge uncertainty stems from one or more of the following categories. So the first is taxonomic uncertainty. So, for example, these are species that need additional work to resolve their taxonomy. And I'm going to give you some examples of that later. And we've been working on some of that right now with some of our species, and also are planning to apply for a competitive state wildlife grant to look at a species group to try to resolve this taxonomic uncertainty. The other type of uncertainty stems from distributional uncertainty. That's either where we have a lack of basic inventory data on species occurrence and distribution. Or, for example, we may have species that haven't been surveyed for 50 years or something, and we need to go back and look at some of those historic locations and see if they're still there. The third is ecological uncertainty, and that includes a variety of things, everything from population dynamics or trends to the effects of natural or human-caused threats and stressors, or specific habitat requirements. We might not know which habitats certain species are associated with, or if they really have particular problems. So the conservation actions for those are to go and address those needs. So these are all species that we believe meet the species of greatest conservation need criteria, but we lack adequate data to confirm it. So the conservation actions for these species are to address or fill these knowledge gaps. So for each of the species we identified as a species of greatest information need, we identify what the primary source of uncertainty is for each of those species, recognizing that for many of them, it's not just one type of knowledge uncertainty. There can be multiple types of uncertainty. So just to give you a sense of the breakdown in our latest State Wildlife Action Plan by taxonomic group, for species of greatest conservation need, there were 18 fishes, 4 amphibians, 21 mammals, 2 reptiles, 45 birds, 25 invertebrates, and 22 plants. And I want to note that in this revision of our State Wildlife Action Plan, we addressed plant conservation. We included plants. So this is the first time Idaho has included plants in their State Wildlife Action Plan, and we're really excited about that. For species of greatest information need, the breakdown is we had 132, 7 fishes, 4 amphibians, 16 mammals, 4 reptiles, 6 birds, 73 invertebrates, and 22 plants. And this list also includes 4 species groups or assemblages, including the migratory shorebird assemblage, which includes 16 migratory shorebird species, the harvestman genus Acuclavella species group with 5 species, and the spur-throat grasshopper genus that has 34 species, and mountain snail genus Oreohelix. The Oreohelix is one that we are currently putting together a proposal for the competitive state wildlife grant program. So in our State Wildlife Action Plan, to address these particular species, what we've done is we organized our State Wildlife Action Plan using the Conservation Measures Partnership taxonomy of threats. And that particular taxonomy doesn't include a category for need. It's specifically focused on threats. So what we did was we added a section to address what we're calling insufficient species and conservation information. So we've got the taxonomy, uncertainty, distributional uncertainty that I just described, and ecological certainty. So to give you some examples of taxonomic uncertainty, the mountain snails, Columbia oregonian, woolly stanleya, which is a plant species that's taxonomy needs to be clarified. Distributional uncertainty has a large group of species, and some of them are lake chub, Nevada goldenrod, western ground snake. Some of these species are really cryptic species, and it's difficult to survey for them in some cases. Shoshone sculpin, northern bog lemming, northern alligator lizard. For ecological uncertainty, it's a wide range of species, and including fish, amphibians, birds, mammals, reptiles, and vertebrates. Some of our bat species, we don't have a really good understanding of some of their ecology, and we need to do a better job looking into it. So another example is evening grosbeak is declining, but we don't understand why it's declining. So that's one of the things we need to look into to figure out what's going on with the species. Can we determine what's causing these declines? In some cases, that means we work within Idaho. In other cases, for wide-ranging species, we're probably going to have to work with others to establish that, or researchers to do research projects. So just to give you some examples of some of the conservation actions we included in our State Wildlife Action Plan to address these species needs. With respect to taxonomic uncertainty, we need to perform genetic analyses to clarify or resolve taxonomy. Distributional uncertainty includes maybe exploring better survey techniques to find these species, eDNA, DNA from fecal droppings, and remote cameras. Ecological uncertainty, just looking at, things like survival, reproduction, and habitat stressors. So I want to share this book with you if you're not familiar with it. It's been out for since 2007. We used this during our 2015 State Wildlife Action Plan Revision 2. We drew a lot in terms of identifying criteria for our species of greatest conservation need. And so this time we're really drawing from this with respect to these species of greatest information need. So if you haven't seen this, I would encourage you to track down a copy. It's an excellent book, got a lot of really relevant information to all of us who are working on state wildlife action plans. And then here's a link to our plan. We will be posting, once our plan is approved, we will be posting the final version on our website. And that's all I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
See, Kim, you have your hand up? Or, yeah, Kim?
Yes. Hi, Rita. Thanks for that.
Hi, Kim.
So I have a quick question. I just want to make sure, are your SGCN lists completely separate from your SGIN list? And then based on your answer, I have a quick follow-up too.
When you say separate, do you mean, do we list them separately within our plan? Is that what you're asking? Yes, we do. Yep. So we have we have two tables, a table of SGCN and a table of SGIN. However, I want to qualify that by saying, even though we categorize those into these two groups, we're not saying one is more important than the other. They are all included in our State Wildlife Action Plan. It's just that it was a way for us to kind of split out conservation actions into these different categories.
Okay. So do you know, we're considering doing the same. I do have an email into the Fish and Wildlife Service about this, but heard mixed things about whether if you can use wildlife state grants for an SGIN and if it needs to be somehow listed within the SGCN. Do you know much about that for your revision?
Yes, and I think Paul Van Ryzen, he's got his hand up, so maybe Paul wants to respond to that. I mean, I could answer it and because I've talked to Fish and Wildlife Service, but Paul, why don't do you want to respond to Kim's question?
Sure, I can do that. I'm going to keep my camera off just because I have a bit of a cold and I'm a bit of a mess today. You're right, Rita, that question has come up to us a number of times. You weren't the first. In fact, it was Washington, Wendy Connolly. I didn't notice if she's on today. Asked us about that sometime last year. And yes, her concern was the issue of the specific term SGCN being what is named in the authorizing legislation for the SWIG program. And therefore, the question is, if you have another name for a group of species, is that group of species eligible for SWIG program funding? And what we have advised, I'll start with Wendy's, the response we gave to Wendy, and they followed through, I think, with our recommendation in that case. We told her that it is perfectly fine to come up with another term, SGIN, or another term. The Fish and Wildlife Service just doesn't get involved at that level with the wildlife action plans. We want to see advancement and innovation and things like that. So we wouldn't have an opinion about it, but we, about whether or not to designate this different group by whatever name, SGIN or another. But what we did recommend to Wendy at the time was to make sure elsewhere in the text of the Wildlife Action Plan that SGIN or that other group is clearly stated to be nested within your SGCN species. And in that case, we agreed, both folks in headquarters and in our Region 1, where Wendy is in Washington, that those species would be eligible for funding. In your case, Rita, I think what you chose to do was to call all of your species swap species. And then within that, having two categories of SGCN and SGIN. So that's a little bit of a different case. I know my counterpart, Leo McLaughlin, and I and my folks in headquarters had a number of conversations about that. Again, we didn't choose to be firm in saying you must use the SGCN moniker. Mainly
Hey, Paul?
because
Paul, so thanks for that. And that looks like we have two good examples. I just want to keep us on track, and Phil and Ross, if you wouldn't mind putting your question in the chat, I want to turn it over to Brett.
sure, you bet.
So we can keep on track. If there's some time at the end for additional questions, we'll certainly do that.
No problem.
Okay, Brett, you're up. Brett, if you're talking, you might be on mute. Oh, there you are. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Do you see my oh, there I am. Do you see my PowerPoint, or do you see my face?
See it, you're not in presenter mode, but we can see it.
Okay. So I just hit that presenter mode there. So let's see. Slideshow, you mean? Same thing?
Just, yeah, so we're seeing the slides and the carousel on the side.
Okay, let's see. Ah, it's on my other screen. Let's see. Hold on a second. This is one of my worst things.
Yeah, I think we could probably manage with just being in that carousel mode.
Okay. So if I just click on it, that's going to be fine. Okay, so all right, so you see the second slide that says swap recommendation report?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, hey everybody, thanks for having me. So I was part of this Seafood Wildlife Diversity Committee called the SWAP Standardization Committee, and then we changed the name to the SWAP Enhancement Working Group, because we don't just want to make swaps the same, we want to make them better. And we came up with this report collectively, and it's based on a bunch of meetings. And we also had we did these surveys, a real general survey at first to kind of look at where people were with their existing swap methodologies, and then a really specific one. And that specific one, we got 56 people from 11 states to answer that survey. So we feel really good about that. And that was swap coordinators and people that were leading technical teams. And so I'm going to give you just some of the high level recommendations from this report. The first thing we recommend is a deliberate process for identifying species to consider in your swap revision. So where do you start? Some states want to look at all of biodiversity, and that's really hard. And so what we came up with these different categories of species to look at. So you start out with your initial SGCN list, and I've illustrated this for Georgia here. We had 643 species to start out with. And then we looked at these different categories of rare species to see which ones were not included as SGCN in 2015. And so we look all down that list, and we see that, things like the RSGCN list that was developed after our swap that added a lot of potential species for us to look at. I'm having to look over my one computer to see my screen. So, but anyways, you looked that, potentially we want to look at over 1,400 species as potential swap species. It doesn't mean they're all going to become swap species, but we want to look at all of those so we don't lose things out. Then we also recommend that states utilize the NatureServe ranking methodology to assess the conservation status of all those potential species and help decide, do they merit SGCN status or not. And as part of this, we sponsored a webinar with NatureServe to show states how to utilize the NatureServe ranking calculator. And we also, our GIS staff, developed some scripts that help automatically calculate or estimate some of the ranking factors based on existing species occurrence data. This right here is in the report. It's the priority tier reference guide. And this is actually something that I think states might actually use. I know several states are using this thing right now. And basically what it is that we agreed upon these categories here. So in this case, data deficient is similar to what, Rita was talking about. We have it as a category of SGCN, but same idea. And for each one of these priority tier levels, we have a textual definition, and then we have these reference criteria. And again, it was really important because we have a lot of rebellious people down here in the South. It's hard. No one wants to be told what to do or how to do things. So this is just a guide to consider as a tool to help you prioritize your species. And so, if a species is lining up with some of these reference criteria here and meets the textual definition, you should consider it, highest conservation concern, but you might have good reason to change that tier based on the fact that maybe you think the G rank is wrong or whatever. It's not like a machine that tells you the answer. You just helps you make that decision. And then here is one way we're actually using that information. This is our high priority watershed data set. So you can consider these like conservation opportunity areas for, watershed level conservation efforts. And what we've done here is we've taken that priority tier as a weighting factor. And so within each HUC-10 watershed in the state, it's prioritized based on the number of SGCN weighted by their priority tier. So, the ones that are dark orange have a lot of highest conservation concern species. So that's just one way you might use it. Another thing we did is we developed a database, Georgia did, called the Southeastern SGCN database. And the idea here is that you can encode a lot of the standard methodology into this database, and that will help swaps become more consistent. And so, for example, we have the standardized threat classification system, baked into this database so that you can just select those things as you're developing your threats. But also we have lots of room for, creative text and input. That's really important to capture that as well. All of the nature of ranking factors are built into this database as well. So you can, look back at this and say, hey, that's how we determined that this species was SGCN. That's the data we had back then. And then similarly, we encoded the CMP standardized conservation actions here as well into the database, along with lots of other ways to classify those conservation actions. This is an overview of kind of the overall SGCN assessment process, starting out with your potential species, put them in the database. You have experts review that, and they may add some or delete some based on, more up-to-date information. You do the nature of ranking, you prioritize species, you kick out some species that maybe really weren't imperiled. You prioritize them into these tiers. Then you identify conservation actions and use the database to kind of summarize the data for your swap plan. And then this is just a website where we've posted all this information for anyone to use it. And, to be totally honest, people ask me, well, who's really using this stuff? Well, I don't know. I mean, I know several states are using that priority tier reference guide. Alabama might be using the database or a lot of the same database structure. But it is hard to get a state to utilize this database when they're starting from a very different place and way of, capturing information. But we put it out there, and hopefully, even if they borrow some of the same data fields to use in their swap assessment, we think it'll be helpful. So, yeah, that's all I have, and be happy for any questions if we have any time.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Brett. Any questions?
Mark, there was one. Brett, can you put the link to the report in the chat?
Yeah, that's all on that one page right here.
Okay.
And let's see, and then there's the chat. Yep. Someone should click on that and make sure it really works, and let me know if it doesn't. Hopefully it will.
Yeah, Brett, if it would be okay, I think I'll send that around to the entire swap coordinator community. I think that's a great resource.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? I will just a couple of minutes for additional questions for Brett or any or the other two speakers. Eileen? Do you have a question, Eileen? Maybe not. Okay, so as we have been doing in the past, we want to spend a little bit of time in breakout groups for all of you to speak with your colleagues and do a little bit of planning together as a group, or identify some other issues. We have some questions. Oh, Eileen said she can't get off mute, so she's going to put her question in the chat. And I'm going to post some questions, sort of trigger questions. We're going to try regional breakout groups this time. So I'm going to set up 4 rooms, and you can self-select your own region. If you're a state like Virginia, where you're in 2 regions, just pick one. And we thought we'd just try to get, use that opportunity for you sort of in similar geographies or in the same region to talk about species of greatest conservation need. So we'll do that and probably break it off around 2:20-ish and come back to a full plenary before we adjourn at 3:30. So just bear with me for 1 minute and I put the, copy the questions in the chat or refer to them as trigger questions, but feel free in your breakout group to take this any way that you want. If there's someone that could, jot down a few notes that we could share when we come back together, that would be awesome. But if there's no one willing to do that, that's no problem either. Okay. So we're going to do 4 breakout rooms, 1 per region, and everyone will have an opportunity. And I don't know that I can. Okay, and I'm going to just go Niafwa, Sifwa, Mafwa, and Wafwa. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms and just, oh, that did not work. I don't know what happened there. I didn't save it, so I'm going to do this again. Sorry about that. All right, we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms and just pick the room that you'd like to go to and wait for your colleagues to join and then go ahead and start your discussion. And somebody just to confirm that you're seeing the rooms on screen.
Yep, that looks great.
I'm not seeing them, Mark.
Neither am I.
Try scrolling down to the bottom. You're going to see a list of names at the top.
I had to go to more, and then there's an option for breakout rooms. I'm in the browser though.
I see it. It says breakout rooms. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Oh, sorry, I don't see the breakout room.
Who is this? Is this Cynthia?
Oh, this is Cynthia.
Yeah, you might have to go down to more, click on more to see the
More.
breakout rooms.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Join.
Hey, Mark?
Okay, I think we're all back. Thanks for that. And always, again, looking for feedback. If breakout groups are useful, if doing them regionally makes sense, or, we can always kind of mix it up too. But I got a chance to listen into all 4 groups and was impressed by the depth of the conversations. So we've got about a little less than 10 minutes just for as a wrap up. I'd ask each group if you could just maybe share a few highlights from your discussion, and then we'll be able to capture those in the notes that way. Do I have a volunteer from NEAFWA to share a few highlights?
Sure. I'll dive on the sword here. So I think our kind of discussion, it was kind of roundabout in a couple ways, but it really, I'd say the central theme was talking about prioritization, both from regional prioritization with our SGCN list, but even the state perspective too, where some states are prioritizing their SGCN lists and some are not. There's kind of a discussion of what are some of the advantages and disadvantages, or maybe implications from setting up those prioritizations. I don't think there was a definitive direct answer or output that one is better than the other, but just conversation revolving around that. So
Great, thanks for that, Alex. Did tiers come up at all in your conversation about prioritization?
I think yes. Every state calls them different things, like if it's priority 1, 2, 3 or tier 1, 2, 3. So yeah, I believe so.
I know that's sort of a mixed bag of states. Some use tiers or priorities, some don't. Okay, but thanks for that update. Great job, Alex. CFWA or CFWA, does anyone want to give us an update? Kind of an overview of what you discussed? Looking at you, Brett. You're the only one with camera on.
So someone would save me there, but yeah, we did talk about tiers a little bit, and we are not looking at universal adoption of tiers from for CFWA, and there's some states that will hang on to their just SGCN or not status, and we all felt like that's fine. And one of the reasons for that was they didn't want to give the impression that some of the species on the list would be not important, so if you say, well, this one's only moderate, let's not do anything for it, that it'd be better just to say, communicate a simple message to the public and your conservation partners. These are our priorities. And if it's on that list, it's important, basically. So I think that was a good argument. And, and I brought up my pitch for tiers is really not, we have a huge swap list for one with plants now. We're going to have about 900 species. But secondly, calling out data deficient species I thought was important, because you don't want Center for Biodiversity to say, hey, look at all these rare species, let's list them, when we can just be explicit and say, hey, give us a chance to do some surveys on these. We're doing something for the species. Give us some time, to get better information. Yeah, we talked about just some other, one of the things that emerged is like when you're trying to do something consistently, or standardize things, you have to be very, very coarse. So like if you're ratcheting up to the regional or the national level, don't try to ask everybody to use the same habitat classification system, because that will never go anywhere. Just keep it like very high level, like, if we can get a list on USGS that's all of the ones with the correct scientific names, that's a win. So, you
Right.
know, so that's pretty much it. I might have missed some things, but
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks for that, Brett. Appreciate it. Mafwa?
This is Eileen in South Dakota. We had a strong group from Minnesota and South Dakota. Minnesota is reevaluating their SGCN process. So this discussion is very good, very helpful to them. We really are not. We are keeping our same criteria. We do not use tiers in South Dakota. The pros of using consistent criteria, obviously it would help users understand across state boundaries. The cons, one con would be to be difficult to get states to agree on those particular criteria. We thought it was important to make the distinction with using the S ranks versus G ranks. The S ranks may simply represent peripheral species that perhaps are not a high priority for a state. What do you need to make your decisions? Minnesota, again, Julia talked about they evaluating each idea and kind of playing it out. How does that play out on the ground? Where does that get you? And trying to nail down answers to each of these questions that you're thinking about. A spreadsheet of criteria would be helpful, but also asking states how they really feel about how effective their criteria have been. If you're kind of locked in, you may have some thoughts that say, I wish we hadn't gone that direction. And how does the process relate to on the ground work? Again, do the tiers really mean anything to you? And if they don't, why use them? Things that information that would be helpful is a better understanding of how to treat the RSGCN list. Mafwa's list is new, and we're all discussing how do we incorporate that if we do. And it would also be good if somebody would compile a list of high priority species by NGOs and other agencies so that we can kind of bring those in as considerations. So those are the highlights, Mark.
Excellent job. Thank you, Eileen. And WAFWA, we have a report from WAFWA.
This is Rita, but I'm wondering if Emily would be willing to share what she shared with our group in terms of one of the challenges she's facing in Oregon with marine species and some interesting things with respect to economic interests and cultural significance. Emily, do you want to share?
I sure don't, but I sure will just for you, Rita. I did not take great notes or any, really. I took no notes. But the group was really gracious to help me think through some of the challenges that we've been facing in Oregon and provided some resources. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do is figure out how to get all on the same page with the 3 programs within our state wildlife agency that are submitting lists. So wildlife, inland fish, and then marine. And so inland fish and wildlife are largely on the same page. And then the marine realm is different enough that it's been really challenging to get us using criteria that are similar. And so there's interest within that realm in using criteria, including species of economic concern, including species that aren't necessarily of conservation concern currently, that maybe the main threats are current harvest practices. And so none of the other folks in that breakout room had ocean touching their state that they were willing to talk to. I think Texas has a little bit of ocean going on, but we didn't cover that. But it is something that I'd be interesting to continue to have conversations about, is the value of getting all of our programs on the same page, making sure that state species lists are using similar enough criteria that when we compare and crosswalk lists from different states within our region, we're comparing apples to apples and having that communicated more successfully. So those are our main challenges that this group was really helping me think about, and I really appreciated it. Cynthia brought up some of the information that they brought to bear in assessing species of greatest conservation need in Arizona dropped some great information for us as well. And yeah, when we find out how to deal with ocean species, we'll let you know, but still struggling with it. And I'd be happy to hear from any of the other coastal states how they're handling that difference.
Great, thanks for that, Emily. Excellent update. So we're at time. Really appreciate everyone turning out today. And you know, I think we could spend a whole day on SGCN, I'm sure, but hopefully this has provided some resources, information that you can make use of. And you know, as always, if there's a question that's just you're really struggling with and want some feedback from your peers in other states, happy to forward an email to the SWAP email list, or we can take it up on a wildlife diversity call too on every other Wednesday. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next month on the next SWAP Learning Series.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.